rest of the art movement in the 60s and 70s in America. So let's see the photorealism first. The pop art focus on imagery in mass media and inspired the artist to look more closely at photographs in trend called photorealism, and they began to paint what they saw in the photographs. So this is the most famous photorealist artist, Chuck Close. Chuck Close is an American painter, artist, and photographer, and he makes massive scale photorealist portraits. Close often paints abstract portraits of himself and others, which hang in collections internationally. Close also creates photo portraits using a very large format camera. We saw this painting last week, right? The super realistic portrait paintings on large canvases are his representative style of art. Close had been known for his skillful brush work as a graduate student at Yale University. Close began a series of paintings derived from black and white photographs of female nude, which he copied onto canvas and painted in color. As he explained in a 2009 interview, he made a choice in 1967 to make art hard for himself and force a personal artistic breakthrough by abandoning the paintbrush. So through his career, Chuck Close has expanded his contribution to portraiture through the mastery of such varied drawing and painting techniques as ink, graphite, pastel, watercolor, contact crayon, finger painting, and stamp pad ink on paper. And also printmaking techniques such as mezzotint, etching, woodcut, lino cuts, and silk screens, like the screen printing, and as well as handmade paper, collage, Polaroid photographs, and daguerreotypes, and jacquard tapestries. And there was also a minimalism art movement in 60s and 70s. So these are all the minimalism work of art. Looks very simple based on the geometrical shapes. Minimalism is an art movement that began in post-World War II Western art, most strongly with American visual arts in the 1960s and early 1970s. The movement is often interpreted as a reaction against abstract expressionism and modernism. It anticipated contemporary post-minimal art practicals, which extend or reflect on minimalism's original objectives. This is Jonald Judd, and he was an American artist associated with minimalism. In his work, Judd sought autonomy and clarity for the constructed object and the space created by it. So like this, these are all the Donald Judd work. So he abandoned painting for sculpture in the early 1960s. In his essay, Judd found the starting point for a new territory for American art and a simultaneous rejection of regional inherited European artistic values. These values being illusion and represented space, as opposite to real space. And also the installation was the very popular art movement in the 60s and 70s. So the installation art is an artistic genre of three-dimensional works that often are site-specific and designed to transform the perception of a space. So minimalist sculptures were shown carefully positioned in the architectural spaces of a museum or gallery. An artist created installations and spaces conceived of as work of art or viewers to enter and experience. Now let's move on to the conceptual art. There was conceptual art emerged in 60s and 70s, and conceptual art is art in which ideas are paramount and the form that realizes those ideas is secondary, often lightweight or unremarkable. Conceptual art is art in which the concept or idea involved in the work take precedence over traditional aesthetic, technical, and material concerns. So this is a conceptual artist work. The conceptualism is not a style, but a way of thinking about art. And the artists have put it to many different uses. Many conceptual artists worked with language for words when written take on a double life as image and idea. So this is Yoko Ono's conceptual work of art. Yoko Ono's Grapefruit is a conceptual artist book. An artist book is a work of art that is based on the idea of a book and what a book does. So we accept that books are made of paper, are bound, and contain information. So that artist book plays on these truths. And the next art trend in the 60s and 70s is video art, which is very important. So please listen carefully, everyone. So the portable video cameras were first made available to the general public in 1965. And the first 2 weeks of video art quickly followed within weeks of each other. One was by Andy Warhol, who had been asked by a magazine to experiment with one of the new devices. And the other one was by Nam June Paik, who recorded from a taxi his view of the papal motorcade during the Pope's historic visit to New York in 1965. So we're gonna take a look at the Nam June Paik's works closer, because he is a very important figure for the art, the video art. This is the artist, Nam June Paik. He is a Korean American artist, and he worked with various of media, and he is considered to be the founder of video art. This is his video art sculpture. Nam June Paik, internationally recognized as the father of video art, created a large body of work, including video sculptures, installations, performances, videotapes, and television productions. He had a global presence and influence, and his innovative art and visionary ideas continue to inspire a new generation of artists. So I'm going to share Namjoon Park's work video to see his work closer.
Namjoon Paik, I knew of his art long before I saw the piece in Trenton. People say he was the father of video art. He actually did found a whole new art form.
He functioned on a level that was sort of like a Picasso or an Andy Warhol in terms of international stature.
Namjoon Paik's PBS 1963 to 2000 is a spectacular video sculpture at the former NJN Public Television Building in Trenton. It was installed in 1993. The New Jersey State Council on the Arts has just spearheaded its complete restoration. Tom Moran coordinated the installation with Namjoon Paik in the early 1990s when he worked for the New Jersey State Council on the Arts.
I basically picked up the phone and called him and told him about the project. I also said that just a few miles up the road was where the Sarnoff lab was located, and that was where the television cathode ray tube was developed. He was totally on board after about the third sentence.
Lauren Otis, Executive Director of Artworks in Trenton, coordinated the restoration. Artworks is also hosting an exhibition about the video wall.
The piece is three elements. It's the neon elements, and it is the video monitors, and it is the actual content of the video monitors.
One of the modules is surrounded by languages from around the world. And this is the Paik's concern, or his celebration more so, about communication.
There are old Korean symbols, Sumerian pictograms, ancient Brahmi characters, and others.
There's certainly a lot of reference to language, which is something that he was fascinated by language. And he was speaking several languages: Japanese, Chinese, Korean, English. I believe he spoke German and French as well. He was fascinated with knowledge in general.
The second module of 26 monitors focuses on the development of the cathode ray tube. And there's a, kind of a cute little cliche image of a house. So, the idea of the cathode ray tube linked to the house, it's obviously a symbol of how important TV became.
In the content, which is very rapid fire cuts in motion, he almost does a retrospective of a lot of his collaborations. So in the video that you'll see in Trenton are John Cage, David Bowie, Yoko Ono, Charlotte Moorman, all of these artists in the world of Fluxus, one of the movements that Namjoon Paik was a part of.
By the late 1990s, the old TVs and neon in the PBS video walls started to fail. The sculpture went completely dark in 2011 when the state closed NJN and decided to have Channel 13 in New York manage New Jersey's PBS affiliate. George Zenowitz of Z Signs in Trenton repaired Paik's neon symbols.
It's a lot of fun. I'm excited to be part of it. It's a rare opportunity to get to work on a huge piece of neon art by a major artist. It's a light bulb. There's like 100 neon pieces in there, and there was about 9 of them that were burned out. What happens there, it's like old-fashioned Christmas tree lighting. When one burns out, everything else on that circuit also burns out.
C.T. Louis and Rafaela Shirley from CTL Electronics in New York worked closely with Namjoon Paik and now help restore his installations all around the world. They recommended replacing Paik's old TV monitors with LED flat screens. It's not something that's been done with most other Paik restorations, but in this case, There was a compelling reason.
The masking has to move, right?
Yeah, the masking looks like it's off center.
The artwork, which is to be on 24/7 and under direct sunlight, it was a very judicious choice to evolve towards these flat screen.
We've been working on the restoration of this piece, redoing the neon, redoing the wiring, and today the final piece, which is getting in the new acrylic. And so now you'll actually kind of be able to see the neon as it was intended. The old acrylic got crazed and kind of obscured the neon a bit. It's the ultimate gig, for sure. And peeling stuff. There's always peeling involved.
NJN Public Television interviewed Namjoon Paik in 1993 when PBS was first installed.
In my case, things are not only things, but what things can mean, not just by chance you pick up, like Duchamp or Cage do that. But in my case, I construct something, with that distance.
He used something that was sitting in every middle-class living room, a television set, and he turned it into something else that people looked at and began to think about what was the meaning of this to their lives. He was very interested in the democratization of art and of ideas and felt that television was one of the great ways to do that.
All right. So that was the Namjoon Paik's work. So most of the contemporary digital artists nowadays were affected by the founder of the video artist, Namjoon Paik. So he is a very important figure in the art history. And now let's move on to the feminism. So the feminist organizations had originally been formed around such issues as equal rights and equal pay. Because images are so powerful and pervasive in contemporary society and visual culture, quickly became a feminist concern, both in art and in the media. So women art professionals organized to recover women's art of the past, to push for more equitable representation in museums and galleries, and to nurture contemporary women artists. So this is Judy Chicago, who is an American feminist artist, art educator, and writer known for her large collaborative art installation pieces about birth and creation images, which examine the role of women in history and culture. So by the 1970s, Chicago had founded the first feminist art program in the United States. This is Judy Chicago's dinner party work, which is perhaps the most important work from this time. A collaborative work, this dinner party was executed with the help of hundreds of women and several men, arranged around the triangular table and the 39 place settings on the table. Each one created in honor of influential women, such as Egyptian ruler Hatshepsut and novelist Virginia Woolf. And the names of additional 999 important figures, important women are written on the tile floor on the center here. So I'm going to share one last video to see Judy Chicago's interview, so we can understand the background in the 60s and 70s for the women's right. So how she can make her work of art based on the background.
What I wanted to do was I wanted to encourage my students to do what I was then going to try and do in my own work, which was peel away the formal prohibitions to my own content. But of course, they didn't have them yet because they hadn't professionalized like I had. So they didn't have the same level of prohibition against their own content. And as soon as I gave them permission in a context, it was like taking the lid off of a boiling pot. The other really thing that I remember about this, if I can find it, is the cunt cheerleaders. My students were very exuberant. And one time we had a visit from the theorist, T. Grace Atkinson, and she came to the Fresno airport, and my students got themselves up in these costumes, these cunt leader costumes, and they did cheers at the Fresno airport as T. Grace got off the plane, much to the consternation of a convention of Shriners who were descending from the same plane. And I, of course, was like, oh my God. I mean, I'm a middle-class Jewish girl, and I was trying like not to share my chagrin with my students because I didn't want to inhibit them. But at the same time, it was like, but now it's become a historic picture, you know. At that time, in the late 60s, early 70s, mid 70s, for a woman to openly express her own content was extremely dangerous. It was tantamount to risking one's, well, for me, what little modest reputation I had at the time. And as a sort of, you know, wrought in the macho environment of LA art of the 60s. And faced with things like attitudes like, you know, you can't be a woman and an artist too. The idea that there was no such thing as female content, that women didn't have a different point of view. I mean, none of that was accepted. It wasn't even thought about at that time. And so what does that do? What does it do to a young woman who is raised in an environment of form, visual form that comes out of the male experience? So I was basically alone at that time and extremely isolated. And yet I was deeply committed to being myself as an artist. And so in these drawings, I tried to face the constraints of the formal language I had inherited and figure out how I could break through it, literally break through it, without sacrificing the transformation of form, you know, the beauty of form and color and line, but to find a way to be myself using it. And the drawings actually chronicle that.
So that was Judy Chicago, who is a feminist artist. So now we're gonna continue to see the rest of the art movement in the postmodern art in next week. And we have a discussion today related to what we just learned. So we just learned, you know, 60s and 70s art movement in the United States, right? And please choose one of your favorite and tell us why. You know, so we just in the 60s and 70s, you know, we learned pop art and photorealism, minimalism, installation art, conceptual art, video art, and feminism. So choose one of them and tell us why you like that art movement in the 60s and 70s. That's it for today.